You know, there's something marvelously funny about how we've managed to turn the oldest mysteries of existence into the latest marketing opportunities. We've begun to sell the silence between our thoughts, to brand enlightenment as if it were a designer fragrance, now available in 3 easy payments with lifetime access to inner peace. And people line up for it, bless them, because somewhere, deep down, they sense that something's missing. But the joke, the cosmic wink, is that what they're looking for is precisely the one thing that cannot be bought, cannot be borrowed, cannot even be taught, because it's what they already are. We live in an age of marvelous cleverness. Everything has its price tag. Everything has its plan. You can download serenity. You can subscribe to wisdom. There are online courses to teach you how to surrender, and coaches to help you let go, which is rather like hiring a personal trainer to help you fall asleep. We've turned the sacred into a shopping list, and we wonder why the shelves never seem to stay full. But I don't say this in condemnation, only in amusement. Because the human mind, bless it, will try to turn even God into a project. It will seek freedom the way it seeks new shoes, as though liberation was something you could put on and strut around in. And so, the great game begins, the spiritual bazaar, where seekers trade their anxiety for mantras, their loneliness for retreats, their confusion for a teacher's smile. And yet, here's the subtle mischief of it all. The more you chase it, the more it runs. The more you try to buy peace, the more it slips through your fingers. Because what you are trying to purchase is precisely the absence of purchasing the stillness that needs no transaction, the truth that refuses to be packaged. You see, the universe has a delightful way of keeping its deepest secrets safe. It hides them in plain sight, inside the one who's doing the searching. So when you set out to find yourself, you're like a thief sneaking into your own house. You can fill your shopping cart with crystals, books, and sacred playlists, but the one treasure that matters has no barcode. It's the awareness watching the whole performance, the audience that never buys a ticket because it is the theater. And this, perhaps, is why spiritual life in the modern world feels both so abundant and so hollow. We have never had more teachers, and yet never have so many felt so lost. We have shelves full of scriptures, and still we hunger. Not because the teachings are false, but because we've mistaken the menu for the meal. We're chewing on the words, hoping they'll taste like what they describe. The great irony, of course, is that the truth we're chasing is the one thing that can't be sold because it's the one thing no one ever lost. And so the more the world tries to commercialize awakening, the more absurd it all becomes, until, at last, the laughter breaks through. Because you see, and here's the beautiful trick, the whole marketplace, with all its noise and neon lights, is also the divine playing dress-up. Even illusion has its place in the dance. But the moment you try to make a business of the infinite, it will slip through your fingers, whispering, if you can sell it, it isn't it. You see, my friends, somewhere along the way, we decided that even God must earn his living. It used to be that the mystic would vanish into the mountains or the forest, leaving behind only footprints and riddles. The point of his disappearance was not mystery for mystery's sake, but simply that the truth he'd found could not survive being explained. It was too alive for that. But in our modern age, we have discovered a marvelous trick. If the mystic won't come to market, the market will come to the mystic. So, the holy man, once a beggar, now has a business plan. The guru has a logo. The sage has a mailing list. We have taken the prophet in his cave and given him a podcast. And again, I don't say this to mock, it's perfectly understandable. After all, the modern world rewards performance, not presence. And so, even silence must now speak loudly, or it will not be heard at all. But look a little closer and you'll see something curious. The very system that promises to spread wisdom ends up selling entertainment. The temple becomes a stage, the lecture becomes a brand, and what was once a way of being turns into a lifestyle package. We do not meditate to be still. We meditate to be seen meditating. We do not pray to listen. We pray to post. And this is not wickedness. It's simply habit, the old conditioning of the ego, which wants to turn everything into a mirror for itself. Even when it wears robes, the ego loves a spotlight. It says, "Ah, now I am not like the others. I am spiritual." But the moment you must declare it, you have already lost it. You see, the mystic was never against the world. He wasn't rejecting civilization, he was laughing at its seriousness. He understood that the divine does not need advertisement, because it is already everything. The tree doesn't say, "Look at me, I'm enlightened." The bird doesn't need followers to sing. But the human being, clever creature that he is, cannot resist turning even grace into currency. And this is how we turn mystics into merchants, not out of malice, but out of misunderstanding. We mistake transmission for transaction. We believe that truth must be traded to be shared, when in fact, truth only multiplies by being lived. Let me tell you a secret. The real teacher never tries to sell you himself. He sells you back to yourself. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss that quiet sleight of hand the way he disappears as soon as you understand. That's the sign of authenticity, the vanishing act. The false teacher collects disciples. The real one dissolves into your own awareness. But of course, this vanishing is terrible for business. You can't monetize disappearance. You can't build a brand on silence. You can't market the end of marketing. So instead, we take the fragrance of the sacred and bottle it, a little meditation perfume, a drop of enlightenment essence, and we sell it with great sincerity. And the people buy it because it smells faintly of truth. And yet, beneath all this, the ancient knowing remains untouched. The divine cannot be diminished by our attempts to merchandise it any more than the sky is harmed by the smoke rising from our stalls. It just watches, smiling, as we busy ourselves selling clouds. The real tragedy and the real comedy is that we are all customers and vendors in the same cosmic marketplace. We are the mystic selling what we cannot own, and the buyer purchasing what he already has. And the whole game would be quite hopeless if it weren't so funny, because eventually, after enough buying and selling, enough lessons and losses, we stumble upon the simplest of truths, that the real treasure cannot be delivered, cannot be downloaded, and cannot be displayed. It was there, quietly humming beneath the noise of commerce, waiting for the moment when the buyer and the seller both fall silent, and only the being remains. Now, this brings us to a most delightful predicament, the paradox of teaching itself. For here I am, speaking to you about what cannot be spoken, explaining the unexplainable, selling the idea that nothing can be sold. You might say, I am the fox warning you against cleverness while stealing your chickens. And you'd be quite right. But that's the game, you see, the divine riddle of communication. How do you use words to lead someone beyond words? Every genuine teacher faces this problem. The moment he opens his mouth, the truth begins to slip away, because words are wonderfully useful for describing things, but absolutely hopeless for describing being. They are like fingers pointing at the moon. Helpful, yes, but if you start licking the finger, you'll never taste the moonlight. So, what is the poor teacher to do? He speaks, knowing he must contradict himself. He teaches, knowing the teaching must one day be thrown away. He builds the bridge only so that you may walk across it and then burn it. The paradox is built into the very structure of truth. To tell you what you already are, I must first pretend you are not it, and that pretense, that illusion, is the beginning of every sermon. But once you see it, the whole performance becomes play. You no longer listen to the words as commandments, but as instruments in a symphony that points to silence. The teacher is not there to inform you, but to unform you, to dissolve the rigid boundaries of belief until you are left, once again, in the spaciousness of your own seeing. And this, you see, is where the trouble starts in our modern world. Because when a message becomes a brand, it can no longer afford to dissolve. It must repeat itself to stay alive. It must promise results, guarantee satisfaction, maintain consistency. The business of truth cannot tolerate the disappearing act of truth itself. So we keep the teachers talking long after the silence should have begun. It's a strange predicament. The real teacher tries to vanish, and the audience keeps pulling him back onto the stage. Tell us again. Explain it once more. And he smiles, perhaps bows, but he knows that to explain again is to move one step further from the thing itself. You can feel the futility in it, can't you? Trying to capture the wind with a net woven of explanations. But the paradox remains delicious, because it means that even the failure of teaching is part of the teaching. The moment you realize that no word can give you reality, that is the moment you begin to see. The whole structure collapses beautifully, like a sandcastle after the tide. And what remains is the sea, vast, boundless, already home. So, when I speak, remember, I am not trying to give you the truth. I am only trying to tickle it awake inside you. The truth doesn't belong to me or to any teacher. It belongs to no one, which is another way of saying it belongs to everyone. And perhaps the only honest thing a teacher can do is to speak beautifully enough that you forget you were listening, and in that forgetting, you begin to hear yourself. That, my friends, is the paradox of teaching. To use illusion, to reveal reality, to speak until the silence behind the words begins to sing, and then to stop, not in triumph, but in laughter. Because the rabbit, as it turns out, was in the hat all along. Now, once the teaching becomes a product, something curious happens. Experience itself goes up for sale. The modern spiritual world has found the cleverest trick of all. It sells you your own awareness, wrapped in candles, playlists, and guided journeys. Come, they say, we will help you experience the divine. And for a while, it works. The music swells, the incense burns, and something inside you stirs. You feel that old longing, that ache for something infinite. But then, like all fine things, the moment fades, the high subsides. And there you are again, back in your skin, scrolling for the next retreat, the next promise, the next dose of transcendence. It's rather like trying to catch sunlight in a jar. You can capture the warmth for a moment, but not the source. Because what you are seeking is not a feeling, it is the one who feels. And that, you see, can never be sold, because it cannot be owned. But we are enchanted by the theater of experience. We chase visions, voices, vibrations, anything that might prove that the divine is real. Yet the divine has been quietly real all along, in the breath that moves through you, in the sound of the kettle boiling, in the sudden laughter that comes from nowhere. We don't recognize it because we've been trained to expect fireworks, when the truth most often arrives as silence. We crave intensity, not intimacy. We want revelation, not recognition. So we turn awakening into a performance, the retreat selfie, the perfect posture, the whispered mantra performed just loud enough to be noticed. It is not that these things are bad, it's simply that they have become currency in a world where attention is the new gold. And when attention becomes currency, even meditation becomes advertising. But here's the beautiful irony. Experience is not the enemy. Experience is the dance of life itself. What traps us is the ownership of experience, the claim, this was mine. The moment you cling to a moment of bliss and call it enlightenment, you have already lost it. You've turned infinity into a souvenir. The truth of the matter is that awakening is not an experience you have. It's the disappearance of the one who's having experiences. It's not another high in the catalog. It's the quiet realization that there was never anyone outside of the happening to claim it. So when you go to a retreat, or sit on your cushion, or chant beneath the stars, remember, the ritual is not the point. The experience is not the point. They are fingers pointing to the moon, echoes of something unspeakably simple. The problem is not that we seek, but that we keep believing what we seek can be delivered, boxed, branded, or blessed. The real miracle, the one nobody can sell you, is happening right now, the miracle of noticing that you are aware. Everything else, the visions, the insights, the mystical light shows, they're the fireworks of consciousness. Lovely, fleeting, unnecessary. And so, perhaps, the most radical act in a world that sells experiences is to stop shopping for them, to sit quietly, unadorned, without incense or soundtrack, and realize that what you were looking for in all those places was never in the experience at all, it was in the one who was looking. And that one, my friends, is still here, utterly free, beyond price, beyond packaging, beyond performance. Now, at this point, you may be wondering, well then, what is the real secret? What is this thing that can't be sold? And the answer, of course, is deliciously disappointing, because the great secret is that there isn't one, or rather, that you are it. The treasure we've been seeking, polishing, advertising, and packaging is the one thing that never left us. The awareness, listening to these words, the silent witness of all your searching, that's the mystery the sages have been pointing to since the beginning of time. It cannot be given to you because it is what you already are. And here's the paradox. The moment you try to grasp it, it slips away, not because it hides, but because it was never an object to be grasped. You see, the mind is a most marvelous trickster. It loves to imagine that it can capture the infinite with the same net it uses to catch fish. But awareness is the ocean itself, vast, boundless, utterly uncatchable. The moment you realize this, the chase collapses. The seeker dissolves into the sought. The question merges with the answer. And all that remains is laughter, the laughter of the universe, discovering it was looking for itself. When you see this clearly, you understand why every true master ends up speaking in riddles or laughter. What else can you do when words are too small to contain what you've found? You can hint, you can dance around it, you can tell stories, but you can't say it. And yet, the more you try to describe it, the more beautifully absurd the whole attempt becomes, like writing love letters to your own heartbeat. This is why the real secret can never be sold. It cannot be taught, packaged, or possessed, because it is not something, it is everything. It's the space in which things appear and disappear, the silence that holds every sound, the stillness in which all motion happens. It is the seeing itself. Now, notice how the mind tries to make that into an object. Ah, yes, the seeing, I must attain it, deepen it, protect it. But that's just the same old trick, the same old shopkeeper rearranging his wares. Awareness cannot be attained because it was never lost. It doesn't belong to you. You belong to it. It was watching long before you were born and will still be watching long after you are gone. So, the so-called spiritual journey is really a cosmic game of hide and seek. God hides from himself in the form of you, pretending to be a separate creature in need of salvation, and then delights in the rediscovery. And what a magnificent joke it is to spend a lifetime searching for what has never been absent. When you finally get the joke, when the laughter rolls through you like thunder, you realize that there was never anything to buy, never anything to sell, never even a buyer or a seller. There was only the play of awareness, pretending, performing, awakening, forgetting, awakening again. And from that recognition comes a deep and unshakable peace. You stop clutching at enlightenment as if it were a prize, and you begin to live it as a dance. You see that the divine doesn't want worship, it wants participation. It wants you to taste, to laugh, to weep, to love, to lose, to live. That is the secret that can't be sold, because to sell it would require turning it into a thing, and the moment you turn it into a thing, it vanishes. The truth refuses to be captured. It remains gloriously wild. You can't trademark infinity. You can only realize it and then laugh at the absurdity of ever having tried to own it. So, when you hear someone say, "I will show you the path to enlightenment," smile gently, because you know now that the only path worth walking is the one you're standing on, the one that has never led anywhere but here. The secret you were seeking has been hiding behind your own eyes all along, patiently waiting for you to stop searching long enough to notice. And when you do, oh, what a relief. To find out there was nothing missing, nothing broken, nothing to buy, nothing to sell, just this, the timeless awareness that was never a product, but the whole store, the seller, the buyer, and the laughter echoing between them. Now, once a person has seen this, once you have tasted the truth that cannot be sold, a peculiar temptation arises. You want to tell everyone. You want to rush into the marketplace, climb upon the nearest soapbox, and shout, "My friends, you are free. You've been free all along." It's a beautiful impulse, really, the desire to share what is beyond words. But it's also, if we're honest, a little dangerous, because the moment you start trying to convert others, you may find that the old ego, the one you thought had quietly died, has returned wearing a new halo. It whispers, now I'm not just awakened, I'm a teacher. I must save them, poor unenlightened souls." And before you know it, you've joined the oldest business in the world, selling salvation door to door. This is what I call the temptation of the missionary. It's not unique to religion or spirituality. It's the same human urge to feel important by improving others. The newly sober evangelizes sobriety. The newly awakened preaches awakening. We all do it. The paradox is that we want to share freedom, but in doing so, we often chain others to our own version of it. You see, truth is not contagious in the way we imagine. You cannot give enlightenment like a gift. You can only embody it. It radiates not through persuasion, but through presence. If you walk into a room completely at ease, others begin to feel that ease without knowing why. That is teaching in its purest form. The real teacher says nothing, because his silence speaks more eloquently than any sermon. But silence, you see, doesn't make a good advertisement. You can't record it, market it, or monetize it. So, the missionary mind insists on words louder, longer, more persuasive words. If they would only understand what I've seen, but the moment you try to explain it, you find it slipping away again, like trying to pour the ocean into a teacup. And so, the wise eventually learn to share without selling, to speak without preaching. They tell stories not to convince, but to amuse, to invite, to remind. Their words are not commandments, but invitations to look not at them, but at oneself. It's a humbling discovery, really, to realize that awakening gives you no special status, no authority. It doesn't make you right. It makes you light. You can laugh at your old seriousness, your old missionary zeal. You see that everyone, even the so-called unawakened, is already divine, playing their part perfectly in this grand drama of pretending and remembering. So, instead of trying to wake the world, you start to dance with it. You listen more. You argue less. You become, in a strange way, transparent, a clear window through which others can glimpse their own reflection. And if someone asks you, what is the truth? You might smile and say, it's whatever's looking through your eyes right now. And then you change the subject. Because the less you try to convince, the more your presence begins to teach. The missionary retires, the mystic laughs, and the divine continues its game of hide and seek, perfectly content to remain half hidden in every heart. You see, after you've wrestled with the temptation to convert the world, something marvelous happens. You begin to see that even giving and receiving, even buying and selling, can be sacred if only we remember what's really being exchanged. There is, if you will, a true economy of spirit, not the economy of profit, of accumulation, but the economy of flow, the great circulation of life giving itself away. The tree gives fruit, the clouds give rain, the body gives breath. Nothing in nature hoards, and yet nothing lacks. And when you align yourself with that rhythm, you see that giving and receiving were never two separate acts. They are the inhale and exhale of the same cosmic breath. Money, too, is part of this play, a symbol of energy passing from one hand to another. The problem is not money itself, but the illusion that you can possess what was meant to move. When you hold too tightly, the current stops, and life begins to stagnate. But when you give freely, not carelessly, but with trust, you become like a river that nourishes everything in its path. The tragedy of the spiritual marketplace is not that people charge for wisdom, but that they forget what wisdom actually is. The moment the intention shifts from sharing to owning, from communion to competition, the river turns to stone. You can see it in the eyes of those who once spoke from the heart and now speak from the brand. They are still sincere, but the flow has thickened. The current has become business. But there's another way, a middle way, as the Buddhists might say. You can share what you love, you can be supported by it, you can even make a living from it, so long as you remember that the living is not the point. The point is the aliveness itself. When you offer something from fullness, it nourishes everyone, including you. But when you offer it from emptiness, hoping to fill yourself through others, the exchange becomes extraction, not expression. The universe, you see, has no accounting department. It does not tally who gave and who received. It just circulates energy endlessly. A teacher shares a story. A listener finds peace. The listener smiles at a stranger. The stranger forgives someone else, and the ripple completes the circle. This is the true currency. Not dollars, not followers, but presence. So the question isn't, should we charge for truth? But rather, from where are we giving it? Are we sharing because we are overflowing, or because we are hungry? When you share from wholeness, the very act of giving enriches you. You are both the giver and the gift, and there is no one left to count the cost. You can see, then, that the true economy of spirit is play. Life playing with itself through exchange, teaching itself through conversation, nourishing itself through generosity. The world's greatest riches cannot be owned, because the moment you try to store them, they die. Love dies when it's withheld. Wisdom dies when it's hoarded. The secret to abundance, then, is simple: spend yourself completely, because when you give from the recognition that you are not the giver, but the giving itself, there is nothing to lose. What flows through you is inexhaustible, and that, perhaps, is the only business worth doing, to be a channel through which the universe remembers its own generosity. And after all the words have been spoken, after all the teachings and transactions and holy bargains, there comes a moment when everything simply stops. The noise fades, the striving quiets, and you are left with something that no one can sell: silence. Not the uncomfortable silence of boredom or awkwardness, but the kind that hums beneath every sound. The silence that isn't the absence of noise, but the presence of everything. It is the background music of the cosmos, playing softly behind all our shouting about enlightenment and success. You see, the ultimate truth has always been silent, because it has nothing to prove. The mountains don't explain themselves, the stars don't advertise their brilliance. They just are. Their existence is their sermon. And if you can be still enough, you begin to feel that the same is true for you. You don't need to perform peace. You only need to stop pretending you lost it. The tragedy of our age is that we've mistaken volume for value. We think that wisdom must have an audience, that insight must echo through a microphone. But the greatest realizations have always been born in quiet places. A monk sweeping a courtyard, a fisherman staring at the horizon, a child watching dust float in a sunbeam. Those moments when nothing happens, and yet everything is revealed. And so, the deeper you go into this strange adventure of awakening, the less there is to say. The truth begins to speak for itself in ways that words can't capture. You find that even a look, a pause, a breath carries the message more clearly than any doctrine. I often think of it this way. When a musician becomes one with his instrument, the music begins to play itself. The musician disappears. The song flows on its own. In the same way, when you become one with awareness, life begins to live itself. There's no need to announce it, no need to declare victory over illusion. You simply are, and that is enough. But this is difficult for the modern mind, which measures meaning by movement and depth by decibels. We feel compelled to explain our silence, to justify our stillness. What are you doing? Someone asks. Nothing, you reply, and immediately feel guilty as though nothing were a waste of time, instead of the source of all things. The real masters knew better. They understood that silence is not emptiness, but fullness. It is the cup that holds all experience, the canvas on which every color appears. And those who have truly seen cannot help but fall into it, not as withdrawal, but as return. This silence, my friends, is the only thing in this world that cannot be sold, because the moment you try to sell it, it vanishes. You can talk about silence endlessly, but that is not silence. You can write books, record talks, build temples, but the real treasure remains invisible, untouchable, freely available to anyone who stops long enough to listen. So the invitation is simple. Don't rush to fill the silence. Let it fill you. Don't try to own it. Let it own you. For in the quiet recognition of what you've always been, this awareness, this stillness, this effortless being, the whole market closes. The buyer, the seller, the product, the price, all dissolve into one vast, luminous hush. And then you realize this was it all along. The silence was never waiting for you to arrive. It was what you were before you began searching. It is the song that plays after the words have gone home. And so, after all this talk of silence, of awareness, of that which cannot be sold, we find ourselves right back where we began, in the middle of life. Here you are, breathing, blinking, being, surrounded by dishes to wash, traffic to dodge, people to love, and bills to pay. It's all still here. The marketplace didn't disappear. You just stopped mistaking it for a temple. And this, you see, is the grand return, the realization that awakening was never about escaping the world, but about seeing the world as it is, a magnificent, fleeting, ridiculous play. You are not here to conquer life or transcend it. You are here to dance with it. You can weep and laugh, lose and find, succeed and fail, all without forgetting that none of it defines you. You might say, the enlightened person is not one who floats above the crowd in perfect serenity, but one who moves among the crowd without being caught by it. They still shop, they still stub their toes, they still forget their passwords, only now they laugh. Because they know the game for what it is. The divine pretending to be human. You see, the awakening isn't the end of the play. It's when you finally stop taking the play so seriously. It's when you can watch the tragedy and the comedy of your own life unfold and think, ah, yes, of course. What else could it be? You understand that sorrow and joy are two faces of the same actor, bowing to each other across the stage. And in that understanding, something magical happens. You begin to participate in the drama fully, not as a prisoner, but as a player. You can cry without despair, love without clinging, speak without persuading. You can even sell without selling your soul, because you know it's all part of the same cosmic improvisation. When you know that you are not the mask, but the one who wears it, you can play any role you like. You can be the fool or the sage, the lover or the loner, the beggar or the king, and enjoy every costume change. Because you see, it was never about winning the game. It was about realizing that the game itself is divine. So, go on, have your tea, take your walk, watch the clouds, make your art, tell your jokes, live your ordinary life with extraordinary lightness. That is enlightenment, not a thunderclap from the heavens, but a quiet chuckle from within. The laughter of someone who finally gets the joke. And when that laughter comes, you'll notice something curious. There is no one left to laugh. The laugher and the laughter are the same. The ocean and the wave have found each other again. The play continues, beautifully, pointlessly, perfectly. For in the end, you never left the marketplace, you simply learned to dance in it. You never stopped being human, you just stopped pretending you weren't divine. And in that beautiful contradiction lies the whole mystery. To be free in the midst of form, silent in the midst of sound, still while spinning through the stars. And so, my friends, we return not to the silence after the play, but to the silence within it. The silence that sings through laughter, through tears, through the rustle of leaves and the hum of traffic. The silence that was never broken, not even by words. You are it. You always were. And the universe is still smiling.